Hello friends, welcome back to the bench. So I decided to take another stab at this Surface laptop that we got from Nick. And what Nick said, which I didn't check, was that the laptop does boot when you put the SSD in. But when it's removed, it's dead. And we confirmed that it's dead, and we confirmed that if we short that little switch, we do get V always on or whatever. So technically it probably would start charging, but we didn't check that. So I replaced the SSD and I turned it on, or I applied voltage. As you can see, it still negotiates the voltage to 20 volts, but it wouldn't consume any power. Now it's grabbing 2.5 watts. Now this is still not charging, but the battery might be faulty, or I might keep it for a little while, and eventually it might start charging, because it might be, especially when the battery hasn't been used in a long time. I already described that in one laptop that we got, or that was Surface Pro 4, I think, or Surface Pro 5, that wouldn't charge, and all I did, I was just connecting it and disconnecting it until the battery woke up. Oh, and look at that. Just as we spoke, 33 watts. Now it's charging. So the battery woke up. That is typical in these machines, because lithium-ion battery, if it drops below a minimum voltage, then it is technically considered risky. Well, it's risky. It's considered that it's very likely faulty. That's why, because on lithium-ion batteries, you don't want the voltage to drop below certain level. If it does, it might, and most often does, permanently damage the battery. So if the battery works after that, and it will not have the same capacity it had before. So with lithium-ion batteries, I have a few laptops on the shelf which I don't use. They're listed on eBay, and like once every 2 weeks I connect them to the charger, because the voltage will slowly drop, because there is a little bit of power consumption from the battery. The self-discharge of lithium-ion batteries is minimum compared to nickel cadmium batteries that we had before. Those experience a lot of self-discharge if you just leave the battery. These old batteries, we used to use them for pretty much everything before lithium-ion batteries came around. And if you just leave it on the shelf for a few weeks, then you take it out and it's dead. You have to recharge it. With lithium-ion batteries, we don't have that problem. The battery can stay for months on the shelf, sometimes even more, and it will not self-discharge. But when it's inserted into the device will periodically use some of that energy from the battery. So eventually it will die, and it needs to be reset. And in this case, as you can see, the reset was just plug it in and wait for it. So with that, let's wait for it to charge a little bit, and then let's turn it on, see what's up. And from the description, it just gets stuck on the Windows logo. There was some, I think, firmware update done, and that's what did it, or maybe the firmware was done because it didn't work. In either case, very likely we'll have to just reset the BIOS on this one. I have some BIOS images that I downloaded off the internet. So we'll see. We'll see what the version of the fit we have on it. It's probably, this is Surface Laptop 4. I would say version would be 11, maybe 12, maybe 10, but very unlikely. But possible. But somewhere in that range, between the 10 and maybe 12. I forgot to turn on my microphone. So let's recap. It's stuck in a boot loop. The power goes to 50 watts, 56 watts. It starts to boot and it turns off. The power consumption goes back to 37 or whatever watts. So the battery is charging. So we know we have the good circuitry on the power rail. But it's stuck in the boot loop. So the only thing that we can pretty much do over here, I just mentioned that I forgot to connect the fan, and that might also be the reason why it boot loops, right? It terminates the procedure because it cannot detect the RPM on the fan. But we already know from Nick that it does that. We reproduced what he saw. So I guess first thing that we learned about this device is that if you don't connect the SSD, that little switch that turns on the power to the rest of the device will not ignite. It will not engage. It will not turn on the power. That's the first I've seen. That also means that if our SSD is faulty, it could cause the computer not to turn on. But in this case, since it's boot looping, let's reflash the BIOS and see if that resolves the problem. Okay, so it looks like the fit version is 16. I have to go download the fit 16 because I don't have it. So I was thinking it's either 10, 11, maybe 12, but it's way up there. So just because it's Surface Laptop 4 doesn't mean it's old. It's actually pretty new. All right, let's go download it and decompress the BIOS. Okay, I can't seem to locate fit 16. 15 is the highest version I have, and I downloaded 16 from somewhere, some forum, but it doesn't seem to work. I hope I didn't infect my computer with something. So what I'm gonna do, since this is the only thing that I can do, we're gonna open a BIOS dump from somewhere from the internet, right? So that will have the wrong ME region. So probably the touch is not gonna work, or some other stuff might not work. But if the computer recovers from the boot loop, we know that it's the BIOS problem. And in that case, we just need to locate fit 16. So let's erase the chip, and we have the backup BIOS, so we're good. And let's upload some random BIOS of the internet. Alright, so the difference now is that we're no longer boot looping, but we're stuck on the Windows logo. Now, can we get to the BIOS? I don't know how to get to the BIOS here, but the logo flashed, but it didn't reboot. So we're no longer in boot loop. Blinking like this usually means the faulty SSD. Oh, couldn't find bootable operating system. Check the boot configuration. Okay, so here's the diagnosis. The BIOS needs to be reflashed, because on this BIOS we don't know if the computer is going to work. Probably not. Some devices might not work because of the ME region was swapped. So we do need fit 16 to fix this. Then afterwards we need to fix the SSD. This is probably NVMe. I don't have a replacement, but it looks like we just need to replace the SSD. Well, perhaps this one could be fixed, maybe, but that was the primary issue, probably. So here's what I think happened. The SSD got corrupted, damaged in some kind of way, some kind of fault. It could be electrical fault, it could be logical fault. The owner tried fixing it by updating the firmware. Due to issue with the SSD, the firmware update was probably terminated mid process, which corrupted the BIOS, which is fine because we should be able to recover from that. And so the only fix for this one is just replace the SSD, and it should be fine. It should work. Now that's the touch works actually. Okay, that is, let's see. We have all the versions. So typically when you swap ME region, the one of the which one is it? C management engine ThinkPad. I might be wrong, but one of these versions shows as 0.0.0.0, and that means it's just not detected. But typically the touch doesn't work on these. Let's see, boot configuration. We're not gonna secured core. I don't know what that is. Date time set to 2022. Nice. Okay, this will work as long as we replace the SSD, and it should be fine. But I'm curious whether it's actually going to work on this BIOS. But we have the original BIOS. Depending on how it got corrupted, when you update the BIOS, the only region that is being updated is the BIOS region, not the entire binary. So even if there is corruption on the BIOS region, that can be swapped, no problem. But for that we need the proper software, which I can't seem to locate. But we're gonna call it a fix. And this was very tricky because the computer doesn't boot without the SSD. And even with faulty SSD, it still boots. Excuse me. Okay, that'll do. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. And I shall see you next time.